50 students filmed the alien girl crying alone until the human exchange student offered a hug. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The silver halls of Galactic Academy Station 7 hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology. Among the throng of diverse alien species moving between classes, Zira Talix stood out not because of her blue-tinted skin or the delicate ridges that framed her face, but because of the tears that silently streamed down her cheeks as she sat alone in the corner of the grand atrium. Zira had never felt more isolated. The prestigious Galactic Academy was supposed to be her chance to prove herself, to show that someone from the small, politically insignificant planet of Nalora could excel in the interstellar community. Instead, she had become an object of fascination and ridicule. The other students, representing over 50 advanced civilizations, watched her from a distance. Some openly recorded her distress with their neural implants, the telltale glow of active recording shimmering in their eyes. Others pretended not to notice, but their sidelong glances betrayed their awareness of her suffering. The Academy was the pinnacle of education in the Galactic Federation, drawing the brightest young minds from across the known universe. Species with centuries of interstellar travel experience mingled with representatives from newly discovered civilizations. Nalora had only joined the Federation 30 standard years ago, and Zira was among the first generation of her people to venture beyond their home system. The morning had started promisingly enough. Zira had received her scores from the latest quantum physics simulation, and she had ranked in the top 10% of her class. Her professors had praised her insight and creativity, noting that her approach to solving complex problems showed a unique perspective that many of her classmates lacked. For a brief moment, Zira had felt like she truly belonged. That feeling vanished during the communal lunch period. As she entered the vast dining hall, with its transparent ceiling offering a breathtaking view of the surrounding nebula, Zira noticed a group of Vexian students gathered around a holographic display. They were watching something and laughing, their tall, slender frames shaking with amusement. As Zira passed by, one of them deliberately increased the volume, and her own voice filled the air. "I just miss home sometimes," her recorded self said, the pain evident in her voice. The way the second sun sets behind the crystal mountains, the smell of neoflowers after the rain. I don't think anyone here understands what it's like to be so far from everything familiar. Zira had shared those feelings in what she thought was a private conversation with her cultural integration advisor. The Vexians had somehow accessed the recording and were now sharing it throughout the Academy's social network. Within minutes, almost everyone had seen it, and the comments were relentless. "Emotional dependency is so primitive. Did you see how her dermal chromatophores darken? They can't even control basic biological functions. This is why Nalorans should stick to their own system. They're not ready for galactic society." Zira had fled the dining hall, unable to face the mixture of mockery and clinical observation from her peers. In most advanced galactic cultures, the open display of emotions was considered a sign of evolutionary immaturity. Species that had achieved interstellar travel typically prided themselves on their emotional control and logical decision-making. Tears were seen as a biological weakness, a remnant of a less evolved past. Now, sitting alone in the atrium, Zira couldn't stop the flow of tears. Each drop that fell to the polished floor seemed to confirm what everyone was saying about her and her kind. She clutched her personal data tablet to her chest, wishing she could disappear or at least return to the familiar comfort of her home planet. The recording students had grown to nearly 50 now, a silent semicircle of observers documenting her breakdown. Their behavior wasn't technically against Academy regulations. Observation and data collection were encouraged as learning tools, but the collective attention made Zira feel like a specimen in a laboratory experiment rather than a fellow student. Among the crowd, a Trilaxian professor paused briefly, their four eyes blinking in sequence as they assessed the situation. An interesting demonstration of primitive emotional regulation, they noted to a colleague before continuing on their way. No one moved to intervene or offer comfort. Such actions would be considered unnecessary and potentially disruptive to a valuable learning opportunity. It was then that Ethan Cole noticed the commotion. Ethan was the only human at Galactic Academy Station 7, part of a pilot exchange program. Earth had joined the Galactic Federation just 5 years ago, making humans among the newest members. While Earth had achieved independent interstellar travel before contact, their technology was considered rudimentary by galactic standards. What had impressed the Federation Council, however, was humanity's remarkable adaptability and their unique cultural and social structures. Ethan had been heading to his comparative xenobiology class when he saw the crowd gathered in the atrium. Curious, he approached, using his shorter stature to weave between the taller alien students. When he reached the front of the semicircle and saw Zira, something in his chest tightened. He recognized her from his quantum theory class, the quiet blue-skinned girl whose insights often challenged the conventional approaches taught by their Arcturian professor. Now, she looked utterly broken, her shoulders shaking with each silent sob. What struck Ethan most wasn't just her distress, but the reaction of the other students. They stood watching, recording, analyzing, but not one of them made a move to help her. Some were even discussing her biological responses as if she were an interesting specimen rather than a person in pain. "Did you notice the fluctuation in her skin pigmentation?" a tall Meridian student remarked. Classic stress response in species with chromatic dermal layers. The saline content of Narration tears is higher than the galactic average, added a floating Quantarii, its translucent body pulsing with light as it spoke. It suggests an evolutionary adaptation to their planet's higher mineral content. Ethan had experienced this clinical detachment before. When he first arrived at the academy, many students had observed and commented on his primitive human behaviors. His tendency to smile at strangers, his use of physical gestures when speaking, and his open display of emotions had all been subjects of fascination and subtle ridicule. The Federation's advanced species prided themselves on having evolved beyond such emotional displays. They valued logic, efficiency, and technological prowess. Compassion wasn't absent from their cultures, but it was expressed through policy and collective action rather than individual comfort and connection. Without hesitation, Ethan stepped forward, breaking through the invisible barrier that separated the observers from Zira. The watching students shifted slightly, their recording devices adjusting to capture this new development. "Hey," Ethan said softly as he approached Zira. "Mind if I sit with you?" Zira looked up, her iridescent eyes wide with surprise. She recognized the human exchange student, though they had never spoken directly. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan sat down beside her on the bench. "Because no one should have to cry alone," he said simply. The surrounding students murmured among themselves, their implants capturing every word and gesture of this unexpected interaction. "I heard what happened in the dining hall," Ethan continued. "For what it's worth, I understand how you feel. I miss Earth too. The sound of rain on the roof, real pizza, my mom's terrible jokes." He smiled gently. "It's not weak to miss home. It's just human. Well, or Nalaran in your case." Zira stared at him, her tears momentarily subsiding in her surprise. In her culture, as in many others throughout the galaxy, physical proximity to strangers was uncommon. Yet this human had sat right beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "They're all recording this," she whispered, her gaze darting to the surrounding students. Ethan shrugged. "Let them. Maybe they'll learn something that their advanced neural processors haven't figured out yet." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth, an actual physical handkerchief, a rarity in an age where most species used sonic cleaners or nanomaterial self-cleaning garments. He offered it to Zira with a gentle smile. "Here, my grandmother insisted I bring this. Said there are some things technology can't replace." Guess she was right. Zira hesitantly took the handkerchief, the soft fabric strange against her fingers. Most materials at the academy were synthetic, designed for optimal functionality rather than comfort. This simple square of cloth felt like a connection to something more personal, more real. "Thank you," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "I'm Ethan, by the way. Ethan Cole. From Earth, obviously." He extended his hand, then realized the gesture might not translate across cultures. "Sorry, human greeting habit." To his surprise, Zira tentatively reached out and took his hand. "I'm Zira Talix. From Nalora." Her skin was cooler than human temperature and slightly textured, like fine silk. "Nice to meet you, Zira. Properly, I mean. I've seen you in quantum theory. Your solution to the Tandarian paradox was brilliant." A faint smile appeared on Zira's face, the first one Ethan had ever seen from her. "You remembered that? Are you kidding? You completely rewrote the approach." Even Professor Kelvik seemed impressed, and I didn't think his species could express surprise. The tension in Zira's shoulders eased slightly as they talked. Around them, the crowd of observers had grown even larger, their recording devices still active, but neither Ethan nor Zira paid them much attention now. "I don't understand," a Vexian student whispered to his companion, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Why would the human initiate physical contact with someone in emotional distress? It serves no practical purpose." "Humans are known for their unusual social behaviors," responded his friend. "They maintain many primitive comfort rituals despite their technological advancement." Ethan met Zira's eyes and saw a flicker of amusement there. For a moment, they shared the absurdity of being the observed rather than the observers. "Would you like to get out of here?" Ethan asked. "The botanical garden on level 3 is usually quiet this time of day. They have some plants from Nalora, I think." Zira nodded, wiping the last of her tears away with Ethan's handkerchief. As they stood up, Ethan noticed her hesitation, the way her eyes darted nervously at the crowd of students still watching them. Without overthinking it, Ethan did what felt natural to him. He opened his arms and offered Zira a hug. "This is how humans comfort each other," he explained. "But only if you want to." The surrounding students fell silent, their recording devices capturing every moment of this unprecedented interaction. Physical contact between different species was rare at the academy, reserved for medical examinations or formal diplomatic greetings. Zira looked at Ethan, then at the crowd around them. For a moment, she seemed uncertain. Then, with a small but determined movement, she stepped forward and allowed Ethan to wrap his arms around her. The hug was gentle at first, a light embrace that Zira could easily step away from. But as Ethan's warmth enveloped her, Zira found herself leaning into the contact, her arms tentatively rising to return the gesture. It was strange and unfamiliar, yet somehow exactly what she needed in that moment. Through the entire exchange, the crowd of students continued to record, their expressions ranging from confusion to fascination. This simple act of comfort between two beings from different worlds was something entirely foreign to many of them, a deviation from the logical, efficient interactions that characterized life at the academy. What none of them realized was that this moment, a human exchange student offering a hug to a crying alien girl while 50 students looked on, would be the beginning of a subtle but profound shift in the culture of Galactic Academy Station 7. News of the hug incident, as it came to be known, spread quickly through the Academy's neural network. By the next morning, virtually every student and faculty member had seen the recording. The reactions varied widely across species and individuals. Many of the more traditional students and professors dismissed it as primitive behavior, evidence that newer Federation members still had much to learn about evolved galactic culture. Others, particularly those from species with more recent histories of emotional expression, viewed the interaction with curiosity rather than disdain. For Zira, the aftermath was both better and worse than she expected. The direct mockery had largely subsided, replaced by a clinical interest in her friendship with the human exchange student. She was no longer just the emotional Nalaran, but half of the interspecies comfort dyad, a term coined by the Academy's Xenosociology department. 3 days after the incident, Zira sat with Ethan in the Academy's botanical garden. As he had mentioned, it did indeed contain several specimens from Nalora, including a small Naya-flower bush that released a sweet, familiar scent when Zira gently touched its leaves. I can't decide if things are better or worse now, Zira said, watching the iridescent pollen float around the delicate blue petals. No one's sharing that recording of me crying anymore, but now everyone's sharing the recording of us. Ethan leaned back on the bench, looking up at the artificial sky dome above them. The garden's environmental systems created a perfect illusion of a clear day, complete with simulated sunlight and occasional gentle breezes. Yeah, I've noticed. Professor Xilex asked if I would allow myself to be scanned during comfort behaviors for their research on primitive emotional regulation techniques. He chuckled. I told them I'd think about it. Zira smiled despite herself. The xenopsychology department sent me a formal request to document my post-comfort emotional state. Apparently, they're fascinated by the effectiveness of physical contact in alleviating distress. And how is your post-comfort emotional state? Ethan asked, mimicking the formal academic tone that was standard at the academy. Honestly, better. Zira's voice softened. No one had touched me since I left home. We Nalorans are actually quite tactile within our family groups. It's just not something we do with strangers. She glanced at Ethan. But it helped. Thank you. Ethan nodded. Humans are the same way. Touch is important to us. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I came here. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the artificial birdsong that played softly through hidden speakers. The garden was designed to provide optimal relaxation for a wide range of species, with areas tailored to different atmospheric preferences and biological needs. You know what's weird? Ethan said finally. I keep thinking about all those students who were just standing there, recording you. Not because they were trying to be cruel, but because it genuinely didn't occur to them to help. It's not their fault, Zira replied. In most advanced galactic cultures, emotional self-sufficiency is considered a cornerstone of civilization. Needing others is seen as evolutionary baggage. But that's just it. Ethan sat up straighter, his voice gaining intensity. They've developed all this amazing technology, traveled to the stars, created this incredible interstellar community, and somewhere along the way, they decided that needing each other was primitive. Zira considered this. I think it's more that they express community differently, through collective achievement, shared knowledge. She paused. But yes, I see your point. There's something missing. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small group of students. To their surprise, it was led by Tren, one of the Vexians who had initially shared the recording of Zira. Excuse the interruption, Tren said, his tall frame casting a shadow over Ethan and Zira. We have a query regarding human comfort rituals. Ethan exchanged a glance with Zira. Okay, what's your question? The physical contact you initiated, the hug, appears to have had measurable positive effects on Zira's emotional state. Our analysis indicates a 73% reduction in visible distress markers. Tren's voice was perfectly modulated, neither friendly nor hostile. We are curious. Is this technique universally applicable across species, or is there a specific physiological compatibility between humans and Nalorans? Ethan blinked, taken aback by the clinical approach to what had been, for him, a simple act of kindness. It's not really a technique, he explained. It's just being there for someone who's hurting. The hug is just one way we show support. But there are others? Asked a Quantarii student floating beside Tren, its translucent body pulsing with interest. Well, yeah, listening, offering encouragement, sometimes just sitting with someone so they're not alone. It depends on the person and the situation. The students exchanged glances, their neural implants likely sharing data and observations. We have been conducting a comparative analysis of emotional regulation strategies across Federation species, Tren continued. Your approach seems unconventional by galactic standards. That's one way of putting it, Ethan said with a slight smile. We would like to learn more, Tren said, surprising both Ethan and Zira. If you are willing to share your knowledge, we propose a formal study group on human comfort methodologies. Zira looked at Ethan, her expression a mixture of disbelief and amusement. The idea of the Vexians, who had initially mocked her emotional display, now wanting to learn about comfort was unexpected, to say the least. Ethan considered for a moment. His first instinct was to refuse. These were, after all, the same students who had humiliated Zira. But there seemed to be a genuine curiosity in their request, and wasn't understanding across species what the Galactic Academy was supposed to be about. "All right," he said finally. "But on one condition." He looked directly at Tren. "You apologize to Zira. Not because I demand it, but because you recognize that sharing her private conversation caused real harm." The Vexian students shifted uncomfortably. Apologies were rare in their culture, seen as unnecessary emotional indulgences rather than meaningful corrective actions. After a moment of silent communication through their neural implants, Tren turned to Zira. "We acknowledge that our actions caused you distress. This was not our primary intention. We found your emotional expression scientifically interesting, but failed to consider its personal significance to you. This was an oversight. We will not distribute your private communications again." It wasn't exactly warm, but by Vexian standards, it was practically effusive. Zira nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you, Tren." "So," Ethan said, breaking the awkward silence that followed, "when do you want to start this study group?" The Human Comfort Methodologies study group began as a small gathering in a corner of the botanical gardens. Besides Ethan and Zira, there were 5 Vexian students, 3 Quantarii, and, surprisingly, a young Arcturian professor named Dr. Velex, who specialized in comparative cultural studies. "I'm merely observing," Dr. Velex had explained when Ethan questioned their presence. The spontaneous formation of cross-species learning communities outside the formal curriculum is relatively rare at the Academy. It presents an interesting research opportunity. What had started as a clinical investigation into human emotional support techniques gradually evolved into something more genuine. The first few sessions were awkward, with the non-human students approaching the concept of comfort as they would any other academic subject, with detached analysis and theoretical frameworks. "I still don't understand the physiological mechanism," Tren had said during their third meeting. "How does proximity to another being alleviate negative emotional states? Is there a biochemical exchange? A neurological synchronization?" Ethan had tried to explain that while there were indeed biological components, the release of oxytocin during physical contact, for instance, the power of comfort went beyond mere biochemistry. "It's about connection," he'd said. "Knowing you're not alone. That someone sees your pain and cares enough to be with you through it." This concept of caring without practical purpose was difficult for many of the advanced species to grasp. Their societies had largely organized around efficiency and collective benefit. Individual suffering was addressed through systemic solutions rather than personal comfort. By the 4th week, the study group had grown to over 20 regular attendees from 12 different species. What had begun as a curiosity had evolved into a genuine cultural exchange. Ethan shared human perspectives on friendship, empathy, and emotional support, while the others offered insights into how their own cultures address social bonding and communal care. Zira had become an essential bridge between the human and non-human perspectives. Her culture shared some emotional expressiveness with humans while also valuing the technological advancement and collective knowledge emphasized by the more established Federation species. "On Nalora," she explained during one session, "we have a tradition called Korithval, which roughly translates to shared breathing. When someone is in distress, family members will sit in a circle around them and synchronize their breathing. It's not so different from the human concept of being there for someone." These discussions began to extend beyond the study group. In classrooms and common areas throughout the Academy, students could be overheard debating the merits of emotional expression versus suppression, the value of individual comfort versus collective solutions, and whether the advanced species had lost something important in their evolution toward logic and efficiency. 6 weeks after the original hug incident, something unexpected happened. A first-year Melidian student received news that their home planet had experienced a natural disaster. While no family members had been harmed, the student was visibly distressed, their normally luminescent skin dulled to a pale gray as they sat alone in the main atrium, the same place where Zira had cried weeks before. Ethan was on his way to class when he noticed the gathering crowd. His heart sank as he saw history repeating itself, another student in pain, surrounded by observers. But as he approached, ready to intervene, he realized something was different. The students weren't just watching. A Vexian, Tren, Ethan realized with surprise, was sitting beside the distressed Melidian, speaking in a low voice. A Quantarii hovered nearby, its body pulsing with gentle, calming lights. Others stood at a respectful distance, not recording but simply present, creating a protective circle rather than an invasive audience. When Tren noticed Ethan, he gestured for him to join them. Kel has received troubling news from their home planet. He explained quietly. We are attempting to provide comfort using the methods we've discussed in our study group. Ethan looked around at the gathered students, many of whom had been part of the crowd recording Zira's distress just weeks ago. The change was subtle but unmistakable, a shift from clinical observation to concerned presence. You're doing great, Ethan said, genuine pride in his voice. As days turned into weeks, similar scenes began to occur throughout the academy. Students from traditionally reserved species were attempting to offer comfort to their peers, sometimes awkwardly, but with genuine intention. The study group expanded, then split into multiple sessions to accommodate growing interest. Even some faculty members began to attend, curious about this human approach to emotional well-being that was gradually influencing academy culture. Not everyone approved of these changes. The more traditional professors and administrators viewed the growing emphasis on emotional support as a distraction from academic excellence. Some senior students from established Federation worlds avoided the comfort movement, as it had come to be known, seeing it as a regression to primitive social structures. This is precisely why integration of less advanced species should be more gradual. Ethan overheard one Trilaxian professor saying to another, their primitive emotional patterns are disrupting centuries of evolved social norms. Yet despite the resistance, the movement continued to grow. 2 months after the original incident, over 200 students, nearly 20% of the Academy's population, had participated in at least one comfort methodology session. The true test came during the midterm examination period, a notoriously stressful time when students faced rigorous testing of both their knowledge and their psycho-emotional stability. In previous years, it was common for several students to withdraw due to what was clinically termed adaptation insufficiency, what humans would simply call burnout or emotional exhaustion. This year, something different happened. Students began organizing support circles, creating quiet spaces where those feeling overwhelmed could find companionship and comfort. Older students offered encouragement to first years, sharing not just study materials, but also emotional support. Species that had never engaged in physical contact began experimenting with their own versions of the human hug, adaptations that suited their physiologies while conveying the same sense of connection. In the midst of this cultural shift, Ethan and Zira had become unlikely celebrities at the Academy. Their friendship, which had begun with a simple act of kindness, had evolved into a deep bond that transcended their different origins. They studied together, shared meals, and continued to lead the comfort methodology sessions that had become so popular. Did you ever imagine any of this would happen? Zira asked Ethan one evening as they sat in their favorite spot in the botanical garden, watching the artificial sunset paint the dome in shades of orange and purple. Ethan shook his head. Honestly, I just saw someone who was hurting and did what felt right. I never expected it to become a movement. The Academy administration is still divided on whether it's a positive development, Zira said. I overheard Dean Vortax saying that emotional expression is contaminating the learning environment. And yet they haven't shut us down, Ethan pointed out. I think even the traditionalists can see that something valuable is happening here. Zira nodded thoughtfully. It's not just about comfort, you know. It's about connection. For all their advanced technology and knowledge, many of these species had forgotten what it means to truly connect with others on an individual level. Humans are far from perfect, Ethan said. We've got plenty of our own problems. But maybe this is what we bring to the Galactic Federation. A reminder that progress doesn't have to mean leaving behind the things that make life meaningful. As they talked, neither of them noticed Dr. Velex, the Arcturian professor who had been observing their study group, standing quietly at the garden entrance. The professor watched the human and the Nalaran with intense interest, their neural implant recording not for public sharing, but for a private report being prepared for the highest levels of the Federation Council. 3 months after the Hug incident, the cultural landscape of Galactic Academy Station 7 had shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as a simple act of comfort between two individuals from relatively new Federation species had sparked a re-evaluation of social norms that had remained unchallenged for centuries. The comfort movement, as it had come to be known, had evolved beyond its original focus on emotional support during times of distress. It had expanded to encompass a broader philosophy of connection and community that emphasized the value of individual relationships alongside collective advancement. Students from traditionally reserved species were learning to express their needs and offer support to others. Those from more emotionally expressive cultures, who had previously suppressed their natural tendencies to conform to galactic norms, were finding new confidence in their inherent social strengths. Even the academic results were showing interesting patterns. Contrary to the concerns of traditional administrators, the increased emotional expression had not detracted from scholarly achievement. In fact, preliminary data suggested that students who participated in comfort circles were showing improved performance in collaborative problem-solving and creative thinking. It was against this backdrop of change that the Federation High Council announced an unprecedented visit to the Academy. A delegation led by Senior Counselor Thexus, one of the most influential figures in galactic politics, would be conducting an inspection and evaluation of this social integration experiment that had gained attention throughout the Federation. The announcement sent waves of anxiety through the Academy. While some saw it as validation of the positive changes taking place, others feared it signaled concern from the highest levels of government about the disruption of traditional norms. "Do you think we're in trouble?" Zira asked Ethan as they walked to their quantum theory class on the morning of the delegation's arrival. The High Council rarely involves itself in Academy affairs unless something is seriously wrong. Ethan tried to project more confidence than he felt. If they were really against what's happening here, they would have shut us down already. "I think they're curious, not angry." "I hope you're right," Zira said, her skin darkening slightly with worry. "Nalora's standing in the Federation is still precarious. If they decide I've been part of disrupting galactic culture..." Ethan squeezed her hand reassuringly, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past months. "Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what friends do." The High Council delegation arrived with characteristic efficiency. Sleek diplomatic vessels docked at the Academy station, and a procession of the Federation's most distinguished leaders made their way through the main atrium. Security drones hovered discreetly around the delegation, while Academy administrators fluttered nervously in their wake. Senior Counselor Thexus led the group, her tall, elegant form commanding immediate respect. As a member of the ancient Elydian species, she represented one of the founding civilizations of the Galactic Federation. The subtle patterns of light that flowed beneath her translucent skin indicated centuries of neural enhancement and biological refinement. Behind her came representatives from a dozen major Federation worlds, their diverse physiologies a testament to the vastness of galactic civilization. Among them, Ethan was surprised to note a human, Ambassador Chun, Earth's first representative to the Federation Council. The delegation spent the morning touring the Academy facilities and observing classes. Students and faculty alike tried to maintain their normal routines despite the distinguished visitors, but an undercurrent of tension ran through every interaction. By early afternoon, news had spread that the council wished to meet with the leaders of the comfort movement. Ethan and Zira, along with several other students who had been instrumental in developing the cross-species comfort techniques, were summoned to the Grand Conference Chamber, a room typically reserved for the most formal academy functions. "Remember, be respectful but honest," Ethan whispered to the nervous group as they waited outside the chamber doors. "What we're doing matters. We don't need to apologize for it." When they entered, the circular chamber felt impossibly vast. The high counselors sat in an elevated semicircle, their positions arranged according to complex Federation protocols. Academy administrators stood at attention along the walls, their expressions unreadable. Senior Counselor Thexis gestured for the students to take the seats arranged at the center of the room. "Please, be comfortable," she said, her voice melodious but authoritative. "This is not a tribunal, but a dialogue." Once they were seated, Thexis activated a holographic display that filled the air above them with images, recordings of comfort sessions, study groups, and spontaneous moments of connection between different species. Ethan recognized many of the scenes, including the original hug that had started everything. For 372 Federation Standard years, Thexis began, Galactic Academy Station 7 has been a model of advanced education and cultural integration. Generations of leaders, scientists, and diplomats have emerged from these halls, shaped by the values and norms that we, as a galactic community, have determined to be most conducive to civilization's progress. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the gathered students. Those values have primarily emphasized logic, efficiency, collective advancement, and the sublimation of individual emotional needs for the greater good. Ethan felt Zira tense beside him. This sounded like the beginning of a reprimand. And yet, Thexis continued, her tone shifting, civilization is not static. Progress is not a linear path. As we welcome new species into our Federation, we must consider whether our established norms represent the pinnacle of social evolution or merely one path among many. The holographic display changed to show a series of data visualizations, academic performance metrics, collaborative problem-solving outcomes, and what appeared to be neurological scans. Dr. Velex has been conducting a thorough study of the changes taking place at this academy over the past 3 months, Thexis explained, nodding toward the Arcturian professor who stood among the administrators. The results have been enlightening. She gestured, and the display focused on a particularly complex data set. Students participating in what you call the comfort movement show a 27% increase in creative problem-solving capacity. Cross-species collaborative projects demonstrate a 34% improvement in outcomes when participants have established emotional connections. Perhaps most significantly, the rate of adaptation failure among first-year students from newer Federation worlds has decreased by 62%. Murmurs ran through the chamber as administrators and counselors alike absorbed these statistics. But the numbers tell only part of the story, Thexis continued. What we find most intriguing is the organic nature of this development. No administrative mandate or formal program could have achieved what began with a single spontaneous act of compassion. She looked directly at Ethan now. "Human, your species has been part of our Federation for a mere 5 years. By galactic standards, your civilization is in its infancy. And yet, you have reminded us of something that perhaps some of us had forgotten in our long evolution." Thexis rose from her seat, a formal gesture of respect rarely offered to students. Connection matters. Not merely the technological connections that bind our worlds together, or the political connections that maintain our Federation, but the personal connections that give meaning to our individual existence, regardless of species. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. This was not a reprimand, but a commendation, an acknowledgement from the highest levels of galactic government that the comfort movement represented not a regression but a valuable addition to Federation culture. "We did not come here to end what you have begun," Thexis said, addressing all the student representatives now. "We came to understand it, to learn from it, and perhaps to bring its lessons to the wider Federation." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, matched by the brightening of Zira's skin beside him. Around the room, He could see similar reactions from the other students, a collective exhalation of tension. There will, of course, be challenges ahead, Thexus cautioned. Cultural change is never without resistance. Many will question whether emotional connection compromises the logical foundation of our galactic civilization. These are valid concerns that must be addressed through ongoing dialogue and careful observation of outcomes. She gestured to the Academy administrators. We recommend that the comfort methodologies be formally incorporated into the Academy curriculum, not as a mandatory requirement, but as an available resource for all students. Furthermore, we propose the establishment of a new research initiative focused on the integration of emotional connection practices with the Federation's existing social structures. Dean Vortax, the Academy's chief administrator, stepped forward with a slight bow. The Academy is honored to accept the Council's recommendations, he said, though Ethan thought he detected a note of resigned acceptance rather than enthusiasm in the Dean's voice. Senior Counselor Thexus turned back to the students. You began this journey not as a challenge to our established order, but as an expression of one of the most fundamental aspects of sentient existence, the desire to connect with and support others in times of need. In doing so, you have reminded us that true advancement comes not from abandoning our evolutionary heritage, but from integrating it with our highest aspirations. She smiled, an expression that seemed slightly unpracticed on her ancient face. Perhaps the newest members of our Federation have as much to teach us as we have to teach them. As the formal meeting concluded and the students were dismissed, they gathered in the corridor outside, still processing what had just occurred. Did that really just happen? Zira asked, her voice hushed with disbelief. Did the High Council just endorse the comfort movement? Tren, who had become one of the most dedicated advocates for the new approach despite his initial skepticism, nodded solemnly. It appears that our social experiment has implications far beyond the Academy. This could influence Federation culture for generations to come. Ethan was about to respond when Ambassador Chun, the human representative to the Federation Council, approached their group. Ethan Cole, she said with a warm smile. Earth is proud of what you've accomplished here. Sometimes the most profound diplomatic achievements come not from formal negotiations, but from simple acts of humanity. I didn't set out to be a diplomat, Ethan said honestly. I just saw someone who was hurting and did what felt natural. And therein lies the beauty of it, Ambassador Chen replied. You weren't trying to change galactic culture. You were just being human. And in doing so, you reminded everyone that beneath our different biologies and evolutionary histories, there's something universal in the need for connection. As Ambassador Chen moved on to speak with other students, Ethan found Zira at his side once more. So, she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, it seems your primitive human comfort ritual has become a galactic sensation. How does it feel to be a cultural revolutionary? Ethan laughed. Hardly revolutionary. People have been hugging each other on Earth for thousands of years. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones, Zira replied. She hesitated for a moment, then opened her arms in a now familiar gesture. Speaking of which, Ethan stepped into her embrace without hesitation. The hug is natural between them now, as it had been surprising that first time. Around them, students of a dozen different species watched, not with clinical detachment or recording devices, but with understanding and respect for the connection they witnessed. In the months that followed, the comfort movement continued to evolve and spread. From Galactic Academy Station 7, it expanded to other educational institutions throughout the Federation. Graduates carried its principles into diplomatic corps, scientific research teams, and even commercial enterprises. The cultural shift wasn't without its challenges. Traditional factions within many species resisted what they saw as a regression to primitive emotional patterns. Others embraced the changes too enthusiastically, sometimes missing the nuance and depth that made the original movement meaningful. But gradually, a new balance began to emerge, a galactic culture that valued both logical advancement and emotional connection, that recognized the strength in diversity not just of species, but of approaches to life and relationship. For Ethan and Zira, the journey that had begun with a simple act of comfort in a moment of distress had led to something neither could have imagined. Their friendship had not only survived the scrutiny of an entire academy and the attention of the Federation's highest authorities, but had thrived, growing deeper with each new challenge and triumph. On the one-year anniversary of the Hug incident, a small memorial was installed in the Academy atrium. A simple holographic installation that, when activated, showed two figures from different worlds sharing a moment of connection. Beneath it, in the common galactic script, were words that Ethan had spoken during one of the early comfort methodology sessions. The stars brought us together across unimaginable distances. But it's our willingness to truly see each other, to recognize pain, to offer comfort, to connect despite our differences, that makes us a galactic community rather than just inhabitants of the same space. Students passing by would often pause to activate the hologram and read the inscription. Some would smile in recognition, others would contemplate the message thoughtfully, and occasionally, someone who was having a difficult day would find another student, perhaps of a completely different species, stopping to ask if they needed company or comfort or simply someone to listen. In a galaxy defined by technological marvels and the vastness of space, it was the simple human gesture of offering a hug to someone in distress that had reminded everyone of perhaps the most important truth of all. No matter how far we advance, how many stars we reach, or how sophisticated our civilizations become, the need for connection remains at the heart of what it means to be alive. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.